it is really a joy to be here, and we could pause there for. I wasn't going to make fun of Nils, but I do consider the fact that Nils is leading a healthy building network to be one of my most important leading indicators. That this is actually kind of this topic that I've been passionate about for since I really left medical school. Longer than I would like to say ago. It's really exciting that this is where we're at today. And in the spirit of what Nils asked us all to do, think about a question or offer up our own perspective on this topic, on this movement. That's what I'm planning to do for you in the next few minutes here. Give you my perspective on what I've learned over my career thus far, and hopefully it'll be helpful to you. So as you heard, I have dual roles right now, but they're both focused on this mission. I am the Chief Medical Officer at the International Well Building Institute, for which you probably are most aware of us for the well building standard that's been around for about 10 years now. I'm called the Chief Medical Officer. I think that's mostly to get my MD out there as prominently as possible. I'm joking about that. But I'm also brought in because of my academic background to help drive. As you've heard, I'll talk about it later on. But I've had an opportunity to try to pursue healthy environments at a very granular level, but also in the world of ESG. And I'm excited about that. And then, as I said, I'm an associate professor at the University of Virginia School of Medicine, where I I've convinced them to give me tenure based on the healthy built environments, which was no small feat when I was doing it. So that's me. And basically, both of those two parts of my life, though, have been focused on kind of two central questions now for 20 years, and I keep working on it. One, really basic, how are health and the built environment linked? And then, actually, I'm a very action-oriented person. How can we make healthy built environments equitably available at a global scale? Because just knowing why these things, how they're linked, I don't think anyone in this room is all that interested if we don't go on and actually get out there and do this. And that word equitably is really important. I hope we don't let go of that, to think about if we have healthy environments, they should be available to everyone. But to do that, we have to make them both technically good, academically sound, but also financially not just viable, but exciting to global markets. So the way I've pursued this has actually been through studying the centerpiece. Is how I got to work with GRES. I've actually been really, just as a physician, I've just been continuing, and a researcher, I just keep asking, how did the green building movement pull this off? How did they make a movement for sustainability? And then can we do the same thing for people-oriented impacts of the built environment? And so I continually just have been tried to be a student of how that was pulled off and bring it back to public health so that we can turn our ability to do research and make sure we're generating useful research that isn't just academically interesting and rigorous, but also useful to decision makers. So again, this has kind of been how I have approached a lot of my own academic research. Went from highly technical coefficient style, p-values type stuff that I still love and wish I could do more of, but it's turned into more about thinking in large journals like Health Affairs, like health policy journals, trying to get out this idea that the built environment is an area we need to utilize as an intervention point, and that we can look to financial successes and movements like the green building movement. And the reason I think that is exciting and why we have to think of it as a market is Nils and I have a close friend and my longtime research colleague, many of you may know him, Chris Pike, who's at Arcscoro, but at US. Very early on in my career, GRES And now I'm working for IWBI, thinking about from that vantage point. So I've had a unique ride, as I said, in that position of being a student of the Green Building, working at these kind of levels, having teachers like Nils along the way about how we build markets for things. I've come to the conclusion that I've seen kind of two basic mechanisms for how health and the built environment are linked, and I hopefully maybe these will be helpful to you. And so I would say, and these terms, I would actually love to have feedback on them later today. I'm working on this right now. I feel that there are kind of two influence pathways. One we're all fairly familiar with, and it tends to be the one we gravitate to. I would call it kind of like direct, deterministic. It's basically, when you're thinking about these things, it's how does the site and building design features, the systems, directly impact what I would say kind of is more like individual health and well-being. So this is going to be things like, the air quality, the water quality, noise, sound, light. These are very important, and we should continue to pursue them. But as you'll hear from Nils and everyone, these also they're quite hard to do, right? You need to have very particular environmental conditions for that. So it can feel a little bit heavy to only think that this is going to be the only thing we're going to base our movement on. So I also wanted to make sure, and this is kind of the centerpiece of what I wanted to highlight in my comments, was I've actually found it very exciting to work on, again, working on the term, but something more of an indirect, the idea of how does the building and the site facilitate and make sure we find moments where it might inhibit healthy behaviors, healthy, things like we want, like inclusivity and so forth. And in this situation, you're thinking more of the built environment of the site as a platform for delivering health and well-being programs and policies. And I kind of think about it a little bit as almost like hardware and software. If you know a software you want to run, how do you design the best hardware? Okay, and I have found this as both a researcher. It also is it's a lighter lift, because now you're looking at the again at the quality of the hardware to run the software. It's again, I'm not saying we need to stop doing direct type style research, but I find this to be a really exciting area. And let me tell you a little. I'll show you a core story where I pursued a hardware software research study that it's now 10 years or so ago. So basically, it's the story of Buckingham Elementary School in Dillwyn, Virginia, which is about 2 hours south of where I live, Charlottesville, Virginia. And basically what happened was I was approached by VMDO Architects. It's a very well-known firm in the U.S. that focuses a lot on educational facilities, primary and up through higher education. And the interesting thing was they had gotten a job they were cutting-edge green architects, and they were all excited they were going to be building this beautiful school. But here's the thing. As they had already kind of signed the documents, but then the school superintendent actually came to them with a challenge. And he says, hey, this is great, excited about the green school, but you know what? Actually, the biggest problem in my small rural town is actually childhood obesity. And he basically pointed out, he's like, this $30 million that just got issued by a bond that's going into this green school, that's cool. That is definitely the only $30 million that's going to be going into schools in the next 20 years in my community. It's also the only $30 million that's going to be going into children's health in the next 20. So we need to do something more than just deliver a green school. And so can we make this school also be about health? Can we make it be about obesity prevention? And VMDO, I think, probably panicked slightly, but they had heard this young doctor running around talking about architecture and public health people working together, and they called me out, because I would usually say that speech and then run off stage and not think about it till the next day. They said, well, let's do it. And I was like, oh, I've never actually done this before, but let's try it. So, and just to put it in context is, this is intimidating, because this is a part of Virginia. This is not a fancy part of our state. This is a very rural, low-income, ethnically diverse area of Virginia. And the school we were talking about was actually, there's two schools next to each other. This is from the separate but equal era of the U.S., where there were identical schools, where one had been for the black children, one for the white children. And the renovation was actually to build a cafeteria that would link these two together. So there's so much going on in this project, right? And we adding on to this idea of how do we make this an obesity prevention kind of moment for the community. So what we did together was really interesting. We basically took on that hardware software idea and said, okay, how do we design the optimal platform for proven school-based obesity programming and curricula? Because I was aware that I didn't want to be stuck in a moment where I was claiming that we were going to change the color of that wall and that child over there was going to lose 2 pounds, right? I wasn't up for that. But I was up for the fact that we had decades of proven obesity, school-based obesity prevention curricula around physical activity and healthy eating but they had always had an unspoken latent variable of assuming that the facilities themselves could be treated as a commodity. And that's what we focused in on. We was like, that's actually, I don't think that's true. I think these things could be delivered better in certain environments. So what we did was we brought all available evidence around physical activity and healthy eating promotion in schools, and then we built a set of design guidelines and published them in PLOS One for the physical activity design guidelines. We also published healthy eating design guidelines for school architecture, and then we used those guidelines in the actual design of the school. And then we made an evaluation plan focused again on how well the hardware worked out. So the research questions were more like for the school's lunch staff, in your new school that was purpose-built versus the old school, which had the 1950s style, linear cafeteria in the U.S. It was anticipating frozen food. Not so much did you immediately change all your behavior, but are you more enabled? Do you feel more empowered in this school to take on scratch cooking, for example, or do physical activity programming? And we had a lot of positive effects from it. What we're really proud of is also in this very rural, low-income area, the narrative of health got built in from the core to the program. So there was these were unassailable when it came to value engineering, which was amazing. So we have these beautiful architectural active stairs. We were able to spec out VS furniture, which I promised you was not in the original scope, but because they had active bases and it was all about reducing sedentary time for the children, so they couldn't be cut out because they were part of the narrative. We even had buy-in on things like emphasizing the culture that we were trying to build. And so we had noticed that when we went through green schools, it was always a little tour. The fifth grader would bring you around and show you all the green features of the school, and it really emphasized this kind of educational element of the building. So we decided to do the same thing. We highlighted what we felt were the active ingredients of the school and made sure that they were reinforced with signage and so forth. And it was cool because the students they were aware of these things. We used consistent iconography through the school and everything. And we did fun things like make sure that there were wherever possible, when you're walking through the school building, you were always kind of catching glimpses of other kids being very active. Or we also made sure that the school garden, and we removed walls between the actual food service staff and the main cafeteria to kind of position them as teachers. It was a lot of fun. I know I'm not supposed to say that word in a rigorous scientific meeting, but it was great. So then that was my personal experience of it was a really successful building, and you can look it up. We had several grad students working on this, and we did show positive effects on things like reducing sedentary time among children, awareness of the features, and kind of proximal variables suggesting that healthy eating and awareness of fresh foods and vegetables had been increased and so forth, which is really exciting.